So hello everyone from the Kingdom of Cambodia, and if HBO's The Last of Us actually happened in real life, then I would quickly be affected as it started in Indonesia, which is fairly close by. But on that note, today we are going to be talking about The Last of Us, and just before we go any further, I'm going to be talking about spoilers for The Last of Us Part 1, the game, which also kind of means the show, and I'm going to be talking about the show up until episode 3. So if you're someone who has just played the game and maybe watched a couple episodes of the show, I'm not really going to spoil anything that happened in episodes 4 and 5, but I am going to spoil things that happen in the game, and as the show is based on the game, I therefore am going to spoil the show. So if you've never played The Last of Us 1, don't watch this video, and better yet, if you do not want anything spoiled, after you've clicked on this video and clicked off, please delete your history because YouTube is going to start recommending you Last of Us clips and it will spoil it for you. So with that out the way, today we are talking about Ben Shapiro, and what I love so much about this is that it's a case study that confirms what I've been saying for ages. Conservatives do not understand subtext in media because their critical thinking is so terrible. Because Ben Shapiro's take on The Last of Us is so terrible. Just proves my point without a shadow of a doubt. Because he's mad at episodes of The Last of Us because they don't deal with zombies, right? Here's me thinking, zombie film or zombie book or zombie game that isn't actually about zombies is becoming like a very tired trope at this point. But nope, Ben Shapiro seemingly is not aware this trope even exists. One of my favorite zombie books I've read is World War Z, right? World War Z is about like this zombie pandemic, but the point of World War Z isn't about zombies. It's about how different countries, societies, and governments deal with extraordinary circumstances that do threaten like their very existence. And in that, you explore like, how does India react? How does Israel react? How does America react? And what's so funny about World War Z is that it basically predicted how America would handle COVID-19 because it isn't actually about the zombies, it's about American society. And each chapter is about different country society, right? So The Last of Us is not about zombies, and I've made lots of videos on The Last of Us, and one of them I've actually made, which has nothing to do with zombies, is The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 are actually about Israel-Palestine, and a lot of people actually clicked on that video and left me a comment saying, dude, you're reaching, but the actual director of the games and one of the main people on the show, Neil Druckmann, grew up in occupied West Bank and has actually been interviewed numerous times talking about how Israeli politics actually influences The Last of Us.
And if I could go on a tangent real quick, I'm originally from Israel, so I follow a lot of Israeli politics. And there was this guy, Gilad Shalit, a soldier who was kidnapped and held prisoner for years. And there was a big debate in Israel, was it right to like exchange so many people that were in prison for this one soldier to bring him back? And I remember I talked with my dad about it, and I'm like, what do you think? Do you think that was the right decision? And he says, are you asking me as like the soldier's dad? Or as the Prime Minister of Israel?
Because The Last of Us isn't really about zombies. It's about a load of different things. It's not really about zombies. And also, even for Last of Us fans, I see a lot of people talking about like The Cure a lot. And even that, The Last of Us isn't about The Cure. It's not about zombies. It's not really about like saving the world and stuff like that. It's about a multitude of different things. And most importantly to the story, it's about characters, about character development, and it's about the main theme of basically love for the first one and hate for the second one, while having some commentary about society. So Jackson is meant to be more like socialist, federal controlled zones are meant to be fascist. In the second game, you have like the Seraphites, who are like religious extremists. You have the WLF, which are kind of like a stand-in for the Israeli Defense Force. You have these games exploring all these different things. The zombie part of the world is just there to create these situations. The games and the show are not really about the zombie things. But Ben Shapiro amazingly doesn't like the show because it's not actually about the zombies. So if you click on this video, you may be wanting like a massive dunking on Ben Shapiro. And don't worry, we're going to do this, but I have come a bit later to this. I only just watched episode 3 last week, and also I wanted to make like a longer video about it. So if you just want someone like reacting to Ben Shapiro's criticism, I'm pretty sure Hassan has like uploaded a clip of him reacting to it, so go watch that. So what we're going to do is going to break down his Facebook post, and then we're going to break down his actual video review of episode 3, and that is just after I give like my takes on this stuff, and I'm actually going to give some of my own, I guess, critique of the show compared to the games. I really do like the show, but I do understand why some people might not like it as much, and all of that coming up for you today. So just before we get into Ben Shapiro's disastrous takes and all the people like roasting him for it, I just thought I'd give my opinion on The Last of Us and my experience with it. So The Last of Us Part 1 I played when I was 17, and I really, really liked it. And again, we are spoiling The Last of Us Part 1, meaning we are spoiling the show. Please click away if you don't want to know anything about this. It's the last warning I'm going to give you. So I was a big fan of Uncharted, and I did like The Last of Us. It did actually really scare me. I'm not really a fan of like the survival horror genre of games. But then the ending, right? Let's talk about the ending. The ending felt like a big subversion at the time, because you play a game and you play this role and you play as Joel, and you kind of feel like throughout the game, even though he does pretty terrible things, Joel is kind of an extension of the player. And then we get to the ending, and the choice is, will Joel save Ellie, or will Ellie be made into a cure for this horrible cordyceps pandemic and stuff like that? And Joel saves Ellie, and he kills a lot of people, he kills the doctors, and he even kills Marlene. And this feels like the player does not have control anymore, because this is quite a divisive ending, because I'm sure a lot of people would have picked, well, the greater good, humanity, let's make a cure. Where a lot of other people would say, well, I'd save Ellie, like she had no choice in this, and you know, this is my daughter, basically. And when I was a kid, I guess I kind of didn't like the ending, because I felt like, oh, how selfish, Joel's a terrible person. But then I realized as I got older, that's just my reaction to it, because I feel like I control Joel. But Joel's his own character. He doesn't actually listen to me. He doesn't take into account my feelings. He's a guy who's had this terrible experience. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that I probably would have done what Joel did as well. Like if I put myself in his shoes, I would have done it. And I like the ending more now, because I can already tell right now, Ben Shapiro is going to hate the ending, because he's going to say like, oh, logically, Joel should have let Ellie be made into a cure. Logically, he should have saved mankind. Why would he do this for selfish reasons? And we all know that take is coming. And that even plays into The Last of Us 2. Like, I'm not going to spoil The Last of Us 2 because I don't feel like there's a point right now. But there are choices in that game that are made that people got very, very mad about. But then people have to remember that these characters exist outside of us playing them. We don't control the decisions. And even when they make bad decisions we don't like, that is just part of The Last of Us. We don't get to control them. And like I was saying earlier, The Last of Us is not about the pandemic. It's not about zombies. It's about characters. For Joel, it's about the devastating loss of his daughter, and if he can really become whole again. Can he become his old self through his relationship with Ellie 20 years after his daughter passed? I guess the main message is, how much are you willing to do for the love of someone? And Neil Druckmann himself said this whole notion is actually inspired by Israeli politics, and it's inspired by this prisoner swap, I don't know how many years ago, and it's basically a bunch of Palestinian insurgents were given back to Gaza in return for one IDF soldier. And Neil Druckmann said, he asked his dad, what would you do in this circumstance? And he says, as the Israeli government, I wouldn't do it, but as a father of that soldier, I would give as many Palestinian insurgents as it would take to get my son home.
I remember I talked with my dad about it, and I'm like, what do you think? Do you think that was the right decision? And he says, are you asking me as the soldier's dad or as the prime minister of Israel? Because I would make two very different decisions. As the prime minister of Israel, I think they made the wrong decision. I think they're now less safe because they made this thing. As the guy's dad, I would have traded every prisoner in every prison for this guy. And that's really what the story is about. Do the ends justify the means? And it's really so much about perspective. If it was maybe to save a strange kid versus a family, maybe Joel would have made a very different decision. But when it was his tribe, his daughter, there was no question about what he's going to do.
And that's the sort of thing Neil Druckmann is playing with here. How much are you willing to sacrifice, which actually might make the world more dangerous from an Israeli point of view. And in The Last of Us, it's well, you're literally screwing over humanity potentially, because you're not making a cure for like purely selfish reasons. Anyway, like I said, Last of Us, it's about Israeli politics, it's about governments, it's about love and hate, it's about human relationships, it's about characters, all these different things. It's not really about the zombies. The zombie stuff is very, very interesting. We find it fascinating because it's a real cordyceps, which we saw that ant video, you know, over a decade ago before the first game came out, and it's horrifying that this could maybe happen one day and there's no cure to it. But again, conservatives don't understand subtext. How conservatives are viewing The Last of Us is A to B plot. Not saying The Road doesn't have commentary on other things, but you know, like The Road, that film and that book, the film of Viggo Mortensen, about this journey with a father and a son, and they view it like that, as in terms of like an A to B plot, and it's all about if Ellie can be made into a cure. And that's all the plot is, that's all it's about nothing else. So now let's get into Ben Shapiro's like disastrous review. So for the setup, basically, in episode 3 of HBO's The Last of Us, it basically took the Bill section of the game. Now, in the Bill section of the game, you meet Bill, who is like this survival prepper, who essentially lives alone in a whole town and is like booby-trapped everywhere, so raiders and the infected can't get to him. In the game, the purpose of Bill's character is to be a warning to Joel, and what it is holding a mirror up to Joel saying, if you shut yourself off for the rest of your life, Bill is who you'll become because you're so scared of getting hurt. You're so scared of letting people in again, like he didn't let Tess in properly, and he's scared to let Ellie in because he doesn't want the heartbreak of what happened to him 20 years ago. And really the only solution to ensure that doesn't happen is you cut every single person off. Now, in the show, it's kind of like the reverse of that. The gay relationship Bill has in the first game that ends pretty tragically is different now, where we see this relationship, you know, give Bill a reason to live. And they have like a really, really nice relationship. It's a really amazing episode, really, really sad. Like the ending like was really devastating, but pretty, you know, sweet and lovely in that so many people in this world have such devastating and terrible, terrible deaths. It's just nice to see these two people really get a win. Basically, there's only one zombie in the episode, and you see it on like Bill's security cam, it getting like killed by one of his traps, and that's pretty much it. But Ben Shapiro says here, the entire episode has no zombies, no real threat. It's about two gay dudes who meet and have a relationship in which one grows strawberries for the other, and then they die by not being killed by zombies. One gets cancer and decides to essentially euthanize himself, and Ron Swanson decides that he's going to commit at the same time because of Romeo and Juliet, or Romeo and Romeo in this particular case. Can I just stop there? I know Ben Shapiro is terrible at like media analysis. Has he also not read Romeo and Juliet? Because them two dying at the end of an episode is not like Romeo and Juliet, because in Romeo and Juliet, one fakes their death and then one accidentally dies and then the other one dies after that. That's the tragedy. In this, it's not a tragedy, it's a choice for the characters so they can die together, because there's no point living without the other. I mean, we can maybe view it like Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is meant to be a tragedy. There's nothing really tragic about this. He goes on to say, it's all really well produced and it's beautifully shot. However, here's the problem with Brokeback Zombie Farm. It's a zombie show. There are no zombies in the entire episode, well, there was one. There are no zombie in a zombie show. That is worth pointing out. It literally has nothing to do with the plot of the show. But like I've been saying, I thought it was a tired trope like The Walking Dead, World War Z, The Last of Us, a zombie thing that isn't about zombies. Isn't that what every zombie thing does nowadays? But no, Ben Shapiro, zombie show has to have zombies in it. Zombie show has to be about killing zombies. Zombie show has to be action sequences with zombies, or it's not a good zombie show. The Last of Us has never claimed to be a show just about zombies. These people aren't even zombies because they're not dead. They're alive. They're just infected by a parasite that drives them insane and mutates them. So we have that take. It went viral. Loads of people who are like writers and work on TV say, thank God I don't listen to Ben Shapiro. And if you're a TV writer, just do the opposite of what Ben Shapiro says. And it's honestly no wonder Ben Shapiro failed as a screenwriter. We're going to talk about that a bit after this. Now let's get into his video review. I'm just going to pick little parts of it and we're going to talk about it. Because don't worry, it does get even worse. And also as you're watching it, keep in mind, I think a lot of this is influenced by him just being a crazy homophobe. So let's watch this.
Okay, it's a show about a zombie apocalypse that essentially arises because fungi go viral, essentially, and take over people's brains and turn them into zombies. That is the premise of the show. It is this character, Joel, and this character, Ellie, and they are navigating the zombie apocalypse. And then we get to, so that's the first couple episodes, and they're good. They're really compelling. Again, really well made, really well written. And then we get to episode 3. And this, according to the media, is the single greatest episode of television that has ever been. Problem with this episode is that it absolutely does not advance the plot in any way and actually has no consequences. So the entire plot of the episode is that Ron Swanson, Nick Offerman, but he actually plays Ron Swanson, but Ron Swanson who likes to nail dudes. So Ron Swanson, a libertarian who hates the government and lives in his basement and is a prepper, but also is gay. And it's complete with like sex scenes and the whole thing. And the entire episode has no zombies, no real threat. Here's the problem with Brokeback Zombie Farm. 1, it's a zombie show. There are no zombies in this entire episode, like none. I understand simplistic critique, but there are no zombies in a zombie show. This is worth pointing out. It literally has nothing to do with the plot of the show. This is a show where this show could have this entire episode could have taken place completely without a zombie apocalypse. It just would have been a Showtime romance between 2 middle-aged gay dudes. It is completely irrelevant to the story. And one of the reasons that it is completely irrelevant to the story is because there are no stakes. And the reason that there are no stakes is because, again, we are in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. When you're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, one of 2 issues has to come into play. 1, the threat of the zombies. Or 2, the threat to humanity more broadly. Again, there are only 2 issues in a zombie apocalypse. You could have this whole thing, but the whole thing is these 2 dudes in love, but they're fighting off zombies. But they never fight off the zombies. It's not an issue. So, irrelevant. Or you could have them somehow interact with the main characters. They never do. They interact with the main characters for like 30 seconds. They are both dead by the time the main characters arrive to pick up guns. So this entire episode is a sidestep. It has nothing to do with anything. Ellie and Joel could have just stopped by, found the house, picked up guns, and gone on their merry way, and it would have taken 10 seconds. Instead, you get an entire hour-long digression to do, as I say again, La Caja Falls or whatever this is.
Have you ever seen like such a terrible review of anything? Because even if you don't like the episode, I doubt you don't like the episode for these bizarre reasons. So let's like touch on all of them. So it's pretty clear a lot of this is characterized by homophobia. He really doesn't like just the fact there are 2 gay people on screen. He seems like a bit of a prude because there are like intimate scenes of them together, which to most people, who cares? Like, do you have a problem with that? But Ben Shapiro clearly does. But the fact that he thinks there is like both no stakes and there's no point to the episode in terms of character development, in terms of Joel and Ellie, is absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about the stakes first. He says there's no stakes because there's no like zombie apocalypse. There's no zombies coming to hurt them. This could just happen at any time. Like, this could just be a show set in any era or any period. Of course it couldn't, because this is an isolated town run by Bill that could only happen in extraordinary circumstances like a pandemic. And again, he's someone who hates everyone, and the fact he's letting someone in is like an interesting character development. And the stakes are, well, what happens if something bad happens to one of them? Like, isn't that interesting? Isn't that the stakes for the episode? It is a TV show after all. It's not a movie. We take it episode by episode. Every episode has a different message and meaning and stuff like that. So that's pretty ridiculous that he thinks a zombie thing just has to be about how do we save the world? Like, again, what an idiot. No wonder this guy failed so bad at being a TV screenplay writer, because why is that interesting? If the whole thing is about saving the world, and he's in for a massive shock when it comes to the end of this season, because again, The Last of Us doesn't really care about that, because look at how it ended. The main character of the show doesn't care about humanity, and that again is another point in the episode. Joel hates humanity, or Joel at least doesn't care about humanity. Bill also doesn't care about humanity because they both are people who've had either tragedy, or Bill just generally seems predisposed to hating people, right? So the whole point of the episode is that at the end, Bill writes Joel a letter and basically says, when the world ended and everyone died, I was happy about that because I hate everyone. I hated the government, I just hated people. But then I found my reason for living. I found someone who I loved, and that really made him scared. As he says in the episode, he was scared to lose him. And it basically made his life complete. And he had a good life in the end because he loved this guy so much. And he says to Joel, you and me are the same, and we're there to protect people. And in the letter, he says, so protect Tess, make her like your reason for living. And what Joel kind of takes away from that is, you know, Bill was like me. Bill was jaded. Bill hated people. Bill wanted to close off the world for one reason or another, maybe to not be hurt by society, but then he found a reason for living. So if I look at Bill as an example, as someone who had their whole attitude changed by letting someone in, then maybe I could apply that to Ellie. And that is the message of the episode in relation to Joel's journey, because that is what Bill has always served as. He is just a mechanism to evolve Joel's character, because Joel is the main character here. So in the game, Bill is to show Joel, you don't want to become this, because this is what you're going to become if you keep going down the path you're going down. Ellie is trying to connect with you. If you don't let Ellie in, that just shows you don't want to let anyone in ever again. And the only way to protect yourself from the hurt you used to have is to be like Bill. Cut everyone off and just live alone and survive until you die. So the criticism I will accept is that although I think Bill is a far better character in the show, I think Bill works better in the game as a warning to Joel, because although I do like how they kind of spun this on its head, at the same time, I don't think it works as well in relation to Joel's arc, despite the fact Bill is a better character. The episode is absolutely amazing. I'm happy they did this. So that is a criticism I can understand, but the criticism being, this is like a sidestep, this doesn't matter to anyone, and it has no stakes, therefore it's bad, because it's a zombie show without anything to do with zombies, is absolutely dog shit. It doesn't make sense, and it just shows that conservatives have no critical thinking skills. And maybe that will help Ben Shapiro, because he'll realize that Neil Druckmann, despite growing up in occupied West Bank, is actually pretty liberal and has lots of criticisms for the Israeli government. So that is in the subtext of both games, and maybe he won't notice that, and maybe he'll still like the show, although I kind of doubt that when we move on to season 2 with all the stuff that's in that. Like I said at the start, this has to be the best case study of conservatives not having critical thinking skills and conservatives simply not being able to really analyze the subtext of anything, right? So to Ben Shapiro, all he's thinking about when he watches The Last of Us is, how does Joel and Ellie get from A to B? How does Joel take Ellie to the Fireflies? And how do they make a cure and save the world? That's the show. That's the point of the show. A to B, tunnel vision, all of the subtext around that, and what the show is actually really about. Ben Shapiro doesn't understand that, so therefore his criticism of the show then is, well, where were my zombies in the zombie show? Why wasn't this episode about Joel and Ellie walking across America and stuff like that? Why was it about 2 gay men? Why was it about any of this? All Joel did in this episode was collect guns from Bill's house, and that was the point of his arc in this episode. Again, he doesn't understand any of this because conservatives are just so brainwashed into not having any critical thinking skills. So you can't take a piece of art like The Last of Us and realize what it's trying to say. And I will admit that they use episode 3 to tell a gay love story and to tell this little like contained narrative, but it did have a purpose to the overall plot and also to Joel and Ellie. So I think it's all I wanted to say on that review especially. I find it just so hilarious that Ben Shapiro thinks that Hollywood rejected him because he's a conservative, not that his screenplay was probably absolutely garbage. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks this, and this is funny because normally when you go on like a conservative video, most of the upvoted comments are kind of like sharing their sensibilities, because I've been looking at the anti-SJW YouTube channels all talking about how woke The Last of Us is because of episode 3, and a lot of the comments are disagreeing with them, but it's funny to go on the Ben Shapiro video. Here are the comments for you. So Ben is the type of guy that would watch Up and complain that the first 8 minutes of the film didn't advance the overall plot. I'm 100% non-woke, but this was one of the best episodes of any show I've ever seen. I'm so proud of his comment section, and I hope Ben sees this, that even his fan base isn't as hateful as he is. Here's another funny comment. The relationship was hinted at in the game, but it did end very differently. Being against most woke propaganda, I will say this episode was beautifully laid out. They touch base on the need for humanity and connection. Both Bill and Joel are very disconnected from their humanity and connections with others. This was to show even the most damaged individuals can find love and connections again. It was beautifully done. I'm a heterosexual white guy, and that episode made me shed a tear. Honestly, it was really beautiful. I'm old and honestly a little freaked out with male intimacy, but that's my issue. And I can still recognize a good love story. So isn't that nice that even this older conservative man can recognize that this is a good love story? And also I think it shows why it was so relevant to tell this story, because you have comments like that, people who say they're anti-woke, or, you know, people say they're uncomfortable with male intimacy and stuff, and they're saying they really liked this because what the show did so brilliantly was just, you know, show this gay couple connecting, getting old together, and it was just like a conventional romance you often do not see in media in general, and especially you do not see in media that deals with the post-apocalypse. And it was just really devastating, like that ending. I was thinking about that so much in terms of like my own relationship with my girlfriend and putting myself in that scenario, or even just putting myself in the scenario. We've been together 10 years. I'm pretty confident in saying we're probably going to be together until we're older like this. And it's just pretty horrible to watch. And it's like, how do you deal with the person you love declining faster than you and everything like that? And it just was a really, really amazing episode, and also had a lot of input from gay married men as well, because the director of that episode was a gay married man. A lot of the people working on it were gay, middle-aged married men. I really, really liked it and thought it was really well done. And it's nice to see it's having an impact on loads of people. And through Ben's homophobia and through Ben's real terrible media analysis, which is really no surprise at this point, he completely both misses the point of the episode and just generally doesn't like it because, surprising no one, he doesn't understand it. And like I said, perfectly encapsulates conservatives not having significant critical thinking skills, because Ben Shapiro is someone who loves Dune, he loves Blade Runner, he loves loads of movies that are like anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, and he doesn't think they're woke. But when a show has a gay couple, or when a show has a black person, that is woke. Or, you know, the Batman was anti-white because of one line Catwoman said. So with The Last of Us, he both hates it because it's a gay love story, but he also hates it because he doesn't understand subtext, and he doesn't understand that The Last of Us isn't about zombies. It's not about the cure, not about saving the world. It's about political systems, about how humanity deals with these events. It's about character development. It's about what love can make you do, what hate can make you do. And there's really, really a lot to dissect with these games. Last of Us 1 I liked, but Last of Us Part 2 I love so much. And I'm so happy the HBO show is making this so much more popular. Like, my girlfriend's dad is watching it, and he would never ever play the games because he doesn't play games anymore. And lots of people I know who would never play the games, they are now consuming this media, and it's so nice that it's really well done. Neil Druckmann being so like influential on it is really nice. The only thing I will say is I wish there was more original score, because if you guys really love The Last of Us Part 2, you'll realize most of the score they're using in the show is just taken straight from The Last of Us Part 2. Like, it's not original at all. It's not even really taken from The Last of Us 1, which I thought was pretty interesting. A lot of people won't be here anymore on the video, but to end it, I guess I would give some of my own criticisms between the show and the game. My main point of contention with this is I feel like expanding the world more kind of detracts from how good the setting was in the game, because I really like the notion that most people didn't know what caused this. Most people had no contact with anywhere else. They didn't really understand why this happened. And they're so isolated now, they just don't know what's out there, right? So I didn't like in the show, although it was cool world building, that both Joel knew Tommy was alive and Joel knew where Tommy was, and Joel wants to go find Tommy. I don't like that, because I like the notion that Joel is like this drifter who is now isolated from his brother, and you wonder why they have split up. And that's part of the game. You know, they purposefully split up, but now in the show, Joel really wants to find him. But Joel didn't set off from Boston wanting to find his brother. So I don't like that. I don't like the radio. I don't like the fact that Joel knows what caused the pandemic either. I think that really undermines it. And I just think it makes the world seem too similar to ours. Like, of course, it doesn't really resemble it, but I like in the games how the further you venture out, you don't know what's out there. And in The Last of Us Part 2, they don't know what's out there. They don't know what's in Seattle. They don't know what's in California. So when you get there, you're like so vulnerable because you don't understand the landscape. But now apparently there is so much connection between these places. I think it really just undermines the danger, and it undermines the mystery a bit more, because I don't really like the fact that Joel can call Tommy on the radio and they're nowhere near each other. I don't like Joel knowing what caused the pandemic, and I'm sure there'll be other things that I watch as I go along that people will say that I'll be like, I wish they stayed more true to the games. I also don't like the infected being connected through that like fungal network. Craig Mazin said he came up with it, and Neil Druckmann and Troy Baker said they wish it was in the game. I don't personally like that, because again, I like this isolation. I like this kind of more like isolated danger. And I don't want the infected to become like the Flood in Halo. And for context, if people don't know what I mean, the Flood in Halo are this parasite which take over like all life forms, but they're controlled by a hive mind. And I don't like the thought that the infected could be like this more like sentient faction which has like specific goals and aims. I like them being more isolated and like evolving, how they evolve in different circumstances, like to bloaters. I don't like this, and I can understand why people don't like it, but by and large, I'm really happy the show exists. I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the subtle changes. I'm enjoying the world building, even if I don't like it as much. And I just hope they like nail it all And I am really, really looking forward to season 2. And I think a lot of people who haven't played the games are in for a massive shock. But I think there's a lot of material here, even with just 2 games. I think they could stretch that to 4 seasons. And I hope for season 2, they might explore the 4 years between 1 and 2 a bit more rather than just dive straight into the second game. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And also one more thing I want to plug. I wrote what I would like to see in A Last of Us Part 3. And I wrote that on my Medium page. If you care about what I want in The Last of Us Part 3, go check that out. Link in the description. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.